They say blood is thicker than water, but in my house, blood was just a convenient way to trace the target on my back. My name is Savannah, and for 24 years, I lived under the collective thumb of a family that viewed my existence as a utility rather than a blessing. My mother, Diane, was a master of the subtle undercut, a woman who could compliment your dress while implying you looked like a cheap imitation of someone successful. My older brother, Leo, was her golden boy, the kind of guy who could set the garage on fire and somehow convince everyone that I was the one playing with matches. Growing up in our suburban house in Ohio, I learned early on that the truth was a flexible concept, usually bent to fit whatever narrative kept Leo on a pedestal and kept me in the shadows. The tension reached a breaking point last month when Diane's prized possession went missing. It wasn't just any trinket. It was a vintage Cartier diamond brooch passed down from her grandmother, valued at over $25,000. To Diane, that brooch was her social currency, her proof of heritage and status. To me, it was just a shiny rock that she polished more often than she hugged me. The day it vanished started like any other Tuesday. I was preparing for a job interview, hoping to finally secure enough of a salary to move out of that toxic environment. I had my suit laid out, my resume printed, and a glimmer of hope in my chest. That hope died the second I heard Diane's piercing scream from the master bedroom. "It's gone! Someone took it!" she wailed, stumbling into the hallway. Within seconds, Leo was by her side, his eyes immediately darting toward me with a chilling precision. "Savannah was the only one in the house this morning while we were at breakfast," Leo said, his voice dripping with faux concern. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. I hadn't left my room all morning. "I didn't touch your brooch, Mom. I was practicing my presentation," I defended, but the air in the room had already curdled. Diane looked at me with a coldness that felt like a physical blow. She didn't ask questions. She made accusations. "You've always been jealous of what I have, Savannah. You're desperate to leave this house, aren't you? Desperate enough to steal from your own mother to fund your little escape." The police were called before I could even process the weight of the felony she was pinning on me. Grand theft in the state of Ohio is no joke, and a $25,000 item puts you straight into a high-level felony category. When the officers arrived, Leo was the one who led them through the house, acting the part of the helpful, grieving son. He steered them toward my bedroom with a helpful, "I think I saw her hiding something in her closet earlier." My stomach dropped. I knew then that this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a setup. As the officers tossed my belongings, throwing my interview clothes on the floor, my mind raced. I remembered the heavy silence between Diane and Leo the night before, the hushed whispers behind the kitchen door. They thought I was upstairs, but I had been sitting on the dark patio, hearing only fragments. As the lead officer reached into the pocket of my winter coat, a coat I hadn't worn in months, and pulled out the glittering Cartier brooch, the world went silent. "Is this what you're looking for, ma'am?" he asked. Diane gasped, clutching her chest, while Leo looked at me with a smirk so faint only I could see it. They had done it. They had planted the evidence. But as they led me toward the patrol car in handcuffs, I realized they had made one fatal mistake. In my rush to record my practice interview, I had left my high-quality digital recorder running on the kitchen counter, hidden behind the bread box. They had spent the last hour in that kitchen, thinking they were alone. The sensation of cold steel against my wrists was a physical manifestation of a nightmare I never thought I'd inhabit. As the officers guided me toward the patrol car, the neighborhood felt unnaturally still, as if every window was an eye watching my downfall. I looked back one last time. Diane was leaning into Leo's shoulder, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief, playing the role of the heartbroken mother to perfection. Leo, ever the protector, had his arm wrapped around her, but his eyes were fixed on me with a predatory gleam. They weren't just getting rid of a daughter they didn't like, they were clearing the path for something much darker. The car door slammed, muffling the world, and as we pulled away, I felt a strange, cold clarity wash over me. I wasn't crying. I was calculating. I kept thinking about that small, silver digital recorder sitting behind the bread box in the kitchen. At the station, the fluorescent lights were unforgiving. I was processed like a common criminal, fingerprints, mugshots, the whole humiliating routine. The lead detective, a man named Miller with tired eyes and a voice like sandpaper, sat across from me in the interrogation room. "Savannah, your mother is devastated," he began, sliding a folder across the table. "But the evidence is undeniable. The brooch was in your coat. Your brother saw you near her room. Why did you do it? Was it the debt? We checked your bank statements. You're nearly broke." I looked him straight in the eye, my voice steady despite the trembling in my knees. "Detective, I didn't take that brooch. I was framed." He sighed, a sound of pure exhaustion. "Everyone says they were framed, kid, but mothers don't usually frame their daughters for $25,000 felonies unless there's a very good reason." I leaned forward. "My mother has 25,000 reasons, detective. She's drowning in credit card debt from her gambling trips to Atlantic City, and Leo owes money to people you don't want to meet." While I was sitting in that gray room, the digital recorder back at the house was capturing the true anatomy of the betrayal. It had been running for hours, its sensitive microphone picking up every whisper and clink of a glass in the kitchen. The recording began shortly after the police had driven me away. The first sound was the heavy thud of the front door closing. Then the silence was broken by Leo's sharp, triumphant laugh. "That was easier than I thought." His voice rang out, clear and devoid of any brotherly concern. "Did you see her face? She actually thought the cops would believe her." Then came Diane's voice, no longer wailing or fragile. It was sharp, cold, and businesslike. "I hated doing it to her coat, Leo. If she'd found it before the police arrived, we would have been ruined. You need to be more careful where you plant things." The recording continued, a play-by-play of their conspiracy. "Don't worry, Mom," Leo replied. "The insurance claim is the next step. Once Savannah is convicted, the insurance company will pay out the full value of the brooch. We get the 25 grand, and the best part is, I've already sold the original brooch to that dealer in Chicago. We're doubling our money." My heart would have shattered if it hadn't already turned to stone. They hadn't just framed me to hide a theft. They were committing insurance fraud and using me as the sacrificial lamb to pay off their own sordid debts. "I just hope she doesn't get a good lawyer," Diane mused, the sound of a wine cork popping echoing in the background. "She can't afford one anyway," Leo chuckled. "By the time she gets out of state prison, we'll be long gone and this house will be sold. It's a clean slate, Mom, for both of us." They toasted to my destruction, their glasses clinking in the very kitchen where I had cooked their meals and tried to earn their love for 2 decades. They had no idea that their clean slate was being recorded in high-definition audio, sitting mere inches from their wine glasses. The next morning, a public defender managed to get me released on a signature bond, citing my lack of a prior record and deep ties to the community. Walking out of the precinct felt like stepping onto a different planet. The air was colder, the sun too bright, and my sense of safety was completely obliterated. I had exactly 4 hours before Leo and Diane were expected back from their consolation lunch with the insurance adjuster. My heart was a drum in my chest as I hailed a cab. I didn't have my car keys, the police had taken them, but I knew where the spare was hidden under the loose stone near the patio. My goal was singular, the kitchen. I needed that recorder. If they had found it, I was heading to prison for a very long time. If they hadn't, I was holding the detonator to their entire lives. The house was eerily silent when I slipped through the back door. The smell of expensive wine and stale cigarette smoke lingered in the kitchen, the remnants of their celebration. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely breathe. I crept toward the bread box, my eyes darting to every shadow, half expecting Leo to jump out and finish what he started. I reached behind the heavy wooden box, my fingers brushing against cold plastic. My heart leaped. It was there. I pulled it out, tucked it deep into my bra for safekeeping, and prepared to leave. But then, I heard the gravel crunch in the driveway. They were back early. I didn't have time to run to the back door without being seen through the large kitchen windows. I scrambled into the pantry, pulling the slatted door shut just as the front door creaked open. I'm telling you, Diane, the adjuster bought it hook, line, and sinker. Leo's voice boomed, filled with an arrogance that turned my stomach. He said the police report makes it an open and shut case. Theft by a family member is a standard payout. I peered through the slats, watching them enter the kitchen. Diane looked radiant, her grieving mother mask discarded in favor of a smug, satisfied grin. "And the jeweler in Chicago?" she asked, tossing her designer purse onto the counter right next to where the recorder had been sitting seconds ago. "Wire transfer hits tomorrow morning," Leo replied, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "25,000 from the sale, plus whatever the insurance company cuts us. We're looking at 50 grand, easy. Savannah's little stint in the state penitentiary is basically our retirement fund." They sat down at the kitchen table, less than 5 feet from where I was crouching in the dark. I felt the weight of the recorder against my skin, a silent witness to their malice. "Do you think she'll try to call?" Diane asked, her voice devoid of any maternal instinct. "Let her call," Leo sneered. "No one believes a thief, especially not when the victim is her own saint of a mother. I've already blocked her number on your phone anyway, we're done with her." I took a deep, silent breath, my thumb hovering over the play button on the device. I had 2 choices. I could sneak out when they went upstairs, or I could end this right here in the heart of their betrayal. The smart revenge wasn't just about escaping. It was about the look on their faces when the trap snapped shut. I waited until Leo started talking about how he was going to spend his half of the money on a new car. I stepped out of the pantry, the light from the kitchen hitting my face. The silence that followed was deafening. Leo dropped his beer bottle, the glass shattering across the tile. Diane's face went from smug to ghostly white in a fraction of a second. "Savannah, how are you here?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "The police said." I didn't say a word. I simply held up the small silver recorder and pressed play. The kitchen was suddenly filled with Leo's laugh from the night before, followed by Diane's cold admission. "I hated doing it to her coat, Leo. If she'd found it before the police arrived, we would have been ruined." The recording was crystal clear. The smart revenge had officially begun. The sound of Diane's own voice echoing through the kitchen was like a physical blow. She reached out for the counter to steady herself, her eyes wide with a terror I had never seen before. Leo, however, reacted with his usual venom. He lunged toward me, his face contorted in a mask of rage. "Give me that damn thing," he roared, but I was ready. I stepped back, pulling a heavy kitchen chair between us. "Stay back, Leo," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "It's already uploaded to a cloud server. Destroying this device won't save you. In fact, it'll just add assault to the list of felonies you're about to face." He stopped in his tracks, his chest heaving. The realization that he had been outplayed by the sister he spent years belittling was starting to sink in. "Savannah, honey, let's talk about this," Diane started, her voice shifting back into that manipulative, sugary tone she used to control me. "We were just stressed. We didn't mean those things. We can fix this. We'll tell the police it was all a big mistake. We'll get the charges dropped together." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a profound sense of relief that I was finally free from the illusion of her love. "You didn't just make a mistake, Mom. You tried to trade my life for a designer watch and a gambling debt. You sat in this kitchen and toasted to my imprisonment. There is no fixing that." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I had dialed 911 the moment I stepped out of the pantry. The line had been open the entire time. The police arrived in record time. Detective Miller was the first one through the door, looking skeptical until I handed him the recorder and played the segment where Leo discussed selling the original brooch to a dealer in Chicago. The detective's face hardened. He looked at Leo, then at the shattered beer bottle on the floor. "Mr. Miller," I said, looking him dead in the eye, "I believe you'll find the insurance claim paperwork on the dining table. And if you check Leo's phone, I'm sure you'll find the communication with the buyer in Chicago." Within minutes, the roles were reversed. The handcuffs that had bruised my wrists only hours ago were now being clicked onto Leo and Diane. Diane began to wail, a genuine sound of despair this time, but no one was moved. They were caught red-handed in a web of grand theft, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. As they were led out of the house, Leo turned to me, his face red with fury. "You'll always be nothing, Savannah. You have no one now." I stood on the porch, watching the flashing blue and red lights reflect off the windows of the home that had been my prison. "I have myself, Leo," I whispered, "and for the first time, that's more than enough." I didn't stay in that house a minute longer. I packed a single suitcase with my essentials and left the rest. I took the spare key, locked the front door, and dropped the key down the sewer grate at the end of the driveway. I had already contacted a realtor to put my share of the inheritance, left to me by my father, into a legal freeze until the criminal proceedings were over. I spent that night in a quiet hotel across town. For the first time in years, I slept without the weight of their expectations or the fear of their next move. The news hit the local papers 2 days later. Mother and son arrested in elaborate insurance fraud scheme. The smart revenge wasn't just about seeing them in orange jumpsuits. It was about reclaiming the narrative of my own life. I used the recording as evidence in court, and both Diane and Leo took plea deals to avoid maximum sentences. They are currently serving time, and I have moved 3 states away. I have a new job, a new apartment, and a new life where the only voice I have to listen to is my own. And believe me, I'm finally listening to exactly what I need.